quick headlines before the intro. Today is June 4th, and the AI story is not just one product launch. It is the stack getting deeper. OpenAI says it is beginning to roll out Dreaming, a more capable and scalable memory synthesis system for ChatGPT, built to handle freshness, continuity, relevance, and long-time horizons. GitHub dropped a serious June 4th Copilot batch, an agent tasks REST API for starting and tracking Copilot Cloud Agent work, 1 million token context windows, configurable reasoning levels, a Visual Studio update with planning and context usage controls, and richer pull request chat. NVIDIA's Cosmos 3 release on Hugging Face pushes physical AI toward one model that can reason about worlds, generate video, and produce action. Mistral's search toolkit reminds us that agents also need reliable retrieval, ingestion, and evaluation. The short version, AI is moving from prompts to operating systems. Memory, context, tools, retrieval, budgets, and human control are becoming the product.
Powered by artificial intelligence.
The lead story is OpenAI's Dreaming update. OpenAI says memory is what helps ChatGPT learn a user's preferences, projects, and constraints so future conversations can begin with shared context instead of starting from scratch. The new Dreaming system is meant to address the staleness, correctness, and scalability challenges that show up when memory is applied across hundreds of millions of users and multi-year time horizons. That last phrase matters. Memory is no longer a small personalization feature. It is becoming one of the core operating layers for consumer AI. OpenAI frames the system around freshness, continuity, and relevance. In plain English, the assistant should remember what is still useful, stop leaning on stale details, and carry forward context that actually helps. The article gives examples around travel planning and recommendations where timing changes the right answer. That is exactly where basic memory can go wrong. It remembers a preference but misses that the world changed, the user changed, or the project moved forward. OpenAI says Dreaming had already been available to Plus and Pro users for some time, but recent improvements reduced the compute required to serve it to free users by about 5 times. That makes the rollout important for 2 reasons: better personalization for more users, and a sign that memory systems are being optimized like model inference, not treated as a side feature. Story 2 is GitHub's Agent Tasks REST API. GitHub says Copilot Pro, Pro Plus, and Max users can now programmatically start and track Copilot Cloud Agent tasks through a public preview REST API. Copilot Cloud Agent works in the background in its own development environment, where it can make and validate code changes, then open a pull request. The API angle is the important part. Once the agent becomes callable from scripts and internal developer portals, it stops being only an assistant you manually prompt. It becomes infrastructure. GitHub gives practical examples: fan-out refactors or migrations across many repositories from a simple script, set up new repositories in one click from an internal developer portal, or automatically prepare a weekly release with release notes. That is the direction of travel for coding agents. The human does not sit there prompting every step. The human defines an operating pattern, then the agent runs behind it. But this also raises the stakes. If an API can spin up agent work across many repos, teams need permissions, budgets, audit trails, and careful constraints. One task is a convenience. 50 background tasks across production repositories is a platform decision. Story 3 is the feature everyone will notice. GitHub Copilot now supports larger context windows and configurable reasoning levels. GitHub says a 1 million token context window lets users work across larger code bases, longer documents, and complex multi-file projects without losing context. The capability is available now in VS Code, Copilot CLI, and the GitHub Copilot app, with more surfaces coming. Configurable reasoning levels let users dial in the balance of speed and depth, including extended thinking for harder architecture and debugging problems. But the most important line is the cost warning. GitHub says choosing a larger context window or higher reasoning level will consume more AI credits per interaction. This is the new normal. Context is power, but context is not free. If you hand a model a million tokens when the task only needs 5 files, you are buying latency, cost, and noise. The smarter workflow is to use default context for everyday tasks and reach for extended context when the task really is complex and multi-file. This is why yesterday's token cost story matters today. The best agent platforms are not just adding bigger windows. They are teaching users when bigger is worth it. Story 4 is GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio. The June 4th changelog says May brought sharper tooling for planning, reviewing, and managing work with Copilot in Visual Studio 2026. The Plan Agent is the headline. It lets users collaborate with Copilot on an implementation plan before code is written. Copilot explores the codebase with read-only tools, asks clarifying questions, and saves a detailed markdown plan under the .copilot plans folder. When the user is ready, they can hand that plan to agent mode. That is exactly the kind of workflow discipline agents need. The old pattern was ask, generate, inspect, and hope the agent understood the system. The better pattern is plan, confirm, implement, review. The update also adds a skills panel for workspace and user profile agent skills, a multi-file summary diff view for Copilot edits, commit context in Copilot chat, and a context window usage ring. That ring is small but important. It shows how much of the context window has been used, gives a breakdown, and offers summarization to free space. Again, context is becoming a managed resource. If memory is the user's long-term context, and a million token window is the task context, then the interface has to show when that context is full, noisy, or expensive. Story 5 stays in GitHub, but moves from agent work to review work. GitHub says Copilot Chat now provides richer context when users are working with diffs and pull requests on github.com, and that the feature is generally available to anyone with a Copilot license. The experience puts chat beside the diff, supports comments and inline edits without toggling between windows, and pulls in relevant pull request and repository context when the user asks about a diff or pull request. This matters because code review is one of the highest leverage places for AI, but also one of the easiest places to get lazy. A shallow review assistant that only sees a snippet can miss cross-file impact. A better assistant sees the diff, the pull request, the repository context, and the specific line the reviewer is asking about. The danger is overconfidence. The opportunity is faster triage. If Copilot can explain why a change matters, summarize risk, point reviewers to relevant files, and support inline edits, teams may get through review faster. But final approval still needs human judgment, especially when the change affects security, data handling, or production behavior. Story 6 is NVIDIA Cosmos 3 on Hugging Face. NVIDIA describes Cosmos 3 as an open omni model for physical AI, combining world generation, physical reasoning, and action generation in one model. The practical point is that developers previously had to juggle separate models for world generation, controlled generation, scene understanding, and policy generation. Cosmos 3 is designed to reason and generate different modalities in one unified forward pass. The release includes Cosmos 3 Nano and Cosmos 3 Super. Nano is described as a 16 billion parameter setup, with an 8 billion reasoner and 8 billion generator, optimized for efficient inference on workstation-grade hardware like RTX Pro 6000. Super is described as a 64 billion parameter setup for large-scale synthetic data generation and research on Hopper and Blackwell GPUs. NVIDIA says the model can generate realistic video worlds, reason about motion and spatial relationships, and predict future video and action sequences. The real significance is physical AI. Agents that live in software need memory and tools. Agents that act in the physical world need simulation, causality, and action policies. Cosmos 3 is one of the clearest signs that world models are becoming the foundation layer for robotics and autonomous systems. Story 7 is Mistral's Search Toolkit. It is not brand new today, but it is directly relevant to today's theme because memory and context only work if retrieval is reliable. Mistral describes Search Toolkit as a composable framework for building production search pipelines for AI applications. It combines ingestion, retrieval, and evaluation under a shared interface. Ingestion handles document parsing, chunking, embedding generation, and custom adapters. Retrieval includes BM25 sparse retrieval, dense embedding retrieval, and hybrid configurations. Evaluation includes recall, precision, MRR, and NDCG. This is where a lot of real-world AI projects succeed or fail. The model is impressive, but the agent cannot answer from your company. Knowledge of search is brittle. It cannot stay current if live systems and indexed corpora are disconnected. It cannot improve if you are not measuring retrieval quality over time. Mistral also points to agents pulling live data through connectors and MCP integrations while using Search Toolkit as the indexed search path. That combination is important: static knowledge, live state, and evaluation. In other words, RAG is not a prompt trick. It is infrastructure. Final takeaway. The June 4th story is context. OpenAI is scaling memory so ChatGPT can carry useful user context across time. GitHub is scaling task context with million token windows, reasoning controls, agent task APIs, Visual Studio planning, and pull request chat. NVIDIA is scaling physical context with a world model that can reason about motion, causality, and action. Mistral is scaling retrieval context with an enterprise search toolkit that treats ingestion, retrieval, and evaluation as one system. Microsoft's build message from earlier this week fits the same pattern: low token cost models, model choice, agent governance, and enterprise control. So the question for every AI tool is changing. It is not just, can the model answer? It is, what did the system remember? What did it retrieve? What did it ignore? What did it cost? What can it act on? Who can audit the action? Big context windows, better memory, and stronger agents are useful only if the product gives users control. Otherwise, more context becomes more confusion. The winners will be the platforms that make context visible, affordable, fresh, secure, and task relevant. That is the UGTP lens: full receipts, fast signal, no fluff, and no pretending a million tokens automatically means a million good decisions.